Welcome to the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com, Infogalactic News, and as of today, Infogalactic Tech. Happy to be able to announce and let everybody know that we've now added a second Infogalactic News site. This is Infogalactic Tech, and the thing that I'm really pleased with is the fact that I had nothing to do with it. You know, one of the things that I've been trying to encourage the Dread Elk to do is to step out and take advantage of the various opportunities that are out there and give people the tools that they can leverage to make these sort of things happen. And so that's exactly what's been happening. So far, Tech is the first new sub-site that has been introduced, and pretty soon we'll also be introducing a French language site. And so I'd encourage any of you who really have the time and feel the sense of mission to get involved in this kind of thing. We have the tools. We have the tools to do that. Now, the thing is, this is just an aggregator. That's what it's starting out as. Now what we can do is we can find, the editors are going to find those non-converged stories and that sort of thing. But it's still not going to replace, a whole site like Slashdot or Wired or something that, that was a good and useful site before it got converged. But, one step at a time, we're building towards that. As we build, as we get more of a following, we're already seeing over 10,000 people a day getting their basic news at Infogalactic News, which is pretty incredible when you think about the fact that it hasn't even been around for a month. With Tech, we'll start doing the same thing. And the great thing is that the way that Rifleman has designed the system is that we can very rapidly and very easily spin these things off as long as you've got 3 or 4 people that are willing to shoulder the editorial responsibilities. And so, somebody asked me the other day, why did you take some of these sites off your, like Zero Hedge and stuff, why did you take some of these sites off your blog? And I said, well, I don't need them there anymore. The reason I put them there was so that I could read them, have an easy place to just pop up and read them. But I don't need that anymore because now we have Infogalactic News. I go there to get my news, and I can access all of the 30 or so right-leaning sites. The idea was to replace the Drudge Report links, all of which are almost entirely to the mainstream press, stuff that I don't read. I mean, Drudge must have nearly 100 or more links there, and despite the fact that I would still go to Drudge to see the headlines, I never use any of those aggregation links. I never use them to go to any of those things. Well, what's up with that is that's Drudge's mother's milk. I mean, that's what he's made a living off of, is basically gleaning the mainstream media. So he has a you might, at this point it might be symbiotic, but it used to be a more of a parasitic relationship of Drudge on the mainstream media, so I didn't like it very much. But Drudge has always been focused on the mainstream media, and that's fine. That's his role. That's what he does. I wouldn't dream of criticizing him for it. That's been hugely successful for him. But we thought, look, nobody is going to do this for the right-wing figures. Half of the conservative sites, maybe more, are run by cucks. I mean, you notice that we don't have National Review online there or anything. I mean, why would we? Nobody needs to read that. And so, so we're going to improve just so you understand, that initial Tech site list and that initial, and the third column that is all game related, that's just a first pass. That's not something that we have put a great deal of thought into. Like, for example, a very glaring omission on the game side is Develop. Develop is one of the two best game news sites out there. It's focused on the European news, but it's a great magazine. I read it, and I read the site all the time. They even featured my dev game course in there last year. But we don't even have it up there yet. So that's how new this is. This whole thing really just got going a couple days ago. So, but that's the advantage of what we're doing in alt tech. As you've seen with Andrew Torbett and Gab, A and E are able to react very quickly, very swiftly. And you're seeing, we've already seen Twitter try to react to Gab. I'm not certain, I don't think that Wikipedia's sudden announcement that they're going to get into doing news has anything to do with Infogalactic news. I think it's much more the whole like fake news thing. But nevertheless, the older converged sites are finding that they cannot move anywhere nearly as quickly as we can. And so it's kind of incredible to think that we are able to introduce new features and introduce new stuff for people to use that these very large, very popular, very well-funded sites can't. So so that's good news. I hope you'll continue to it's there for you to use. I hope you'll consider, if you're not if you haven't joined the Burn unit yet, you're not supporting it yet, I'd encourage you to consider it. But whether you do or not, whether you can or not, I would strongly encourage you to start using it. It's very easy. You can find them from the blog. You can see the links, IG News and IG Tech, or you can just find them at news.infogalactic.com and technews.infogalactic.com. I think that's what it is. It's either tech.infogalactic.com or tech news. There is not an RSS yet, but there's going to be very soon. That's probably the most requested feature that we've had, and so I believe that is the top priority of the folks that are working on the news sites. A good question about my shirt. Does anyone know what this is? I just got this in the mail yesterday from one of the readers, and it's kind of ironic because, as you know, I'm a alt-right figurehead, as they say. It is indeed Hebrew. In fact, this is a political shirt, and this is a shirt for the party named Zehut. I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but you may recall that about 2 months ago, I interviewed Moshe Feiglin, the founder of Zehut, and to a certain extent, it would not be entirely insane to describe it as the closest thing that Israel has to an alt-right party. Now, they're not alt-right in the sense that an alt-right Israeli party is going to be very, very different than an alt-right French party or a alt-right U.S. party. But basically, it is the alternative, the new alternative to the mainstream parties like Likud and Labor. I'm not up on, other than my interview with Mr. Feiglin, I'm not up on the Israeli politics. I'm not up on the ins and outs of it and that sort of thing. But what I think that it underlines is the same thing that you see at Vox Populi when you see that the 16 points of the alt-right have been translated into all these different languages. I still have to post the Ukrainian translation. But they've been translating everything from Hebrew to Hungarian to Russian to Ukrainian to German to Italian, you name it. Why? Because the alt-right message of omni-nationalism appeals to people around the world. It appeals to everyone. And there's a very good reason for it, because it is the only political philosophy that is in harmony with science, with history, with philosophy, with logic, and with current events. The people are flocking away from liberalism because liberalism is a failed ideology. The Enlightenment is a failed philosophy. Communism is a failed political system, and socialism is a failed economic system. And so now it's very surprising to a lot of people. If you haven't read my book Cuckservative, I would strongly recommend that you do so, because we actually delve into what the American conservative movement is, what it stems from, and what it believes. And the truth is that, if you notice, I didn't say that conservatism has failed as an ideology, because conservatism is not an ideology, and in fact, it's not even a political philosophy. All it is an attitude. And the thing is, it's not me that's saying that. It's Russell Kirk, the man who wrote The Conscience of a Conservative. No, I'm sorry, that's Barry Goldwater. The Conservative Mind. The Conservative Mind by Russell Kirk is considered to be the Bible, the foundational work of the modern American conservative movement. And if you read it, what you realize is that, first of all, today's conservatives have moved away from many of the 10 basic points, the 10 foundations or 10 pillars, if you will, that Kirk lays out. But more than that, once you read through it, you realize that conservatism never had the chance to succeed because it doesn't actually stand for anything concrete. Conservatism is merely an attitude and a posture that people can strike in opposition to the ongoing liberal trend. And like some of the comments have said there, it's conserve nothing. They haven't even conserved women's bathrooms. And so that's why people are turning away from conservatism, and that's why the alt-right is so significant and so important, because it is an alternative to the existing right that does not involve moving left, that does not involve utopianism like libertarianism or communism or other equally non-existent and impossible ideals. We still have, on the alt-right, we still have ideals, but they are not, the ideals are not the basis for our policy. Any particular philosophers that influence, to be honest, the philosopher that influences me most, of course, is Aristotle. The other philosophers that influence me are Thomas Aquinas and Marcus Aurelius. Those are probably the big three as far as I'm concerned. I'm very underwhelmed and unimpressed by most modern philosophy. In general, modern philosophers are really not very well equipped to construct and maintain logical arguments. And so, I've gotten into it a few times over the years. There's something that might particularly amuse you if you do a search for skeptic or skepticism on my blog. And what it was a fairly detailed debate between me and a philosophy PhD who claimed to be a skeptic. And we were discussing skepticism. And I don't think that he was quite prepared for a layman, such as it is, to actually go directly all the way back to the source of the original skeptics and deal with that. The thing is that, first of all, there is no alt-right police, okay? It is meaningless for one, just dissecting the skeptics, that's it. Have a look at that, and you will probably be able to get a good grasp of my perspective on philosophy. Another thing that you can read if you like is in The Irrational Atheist. I explain why I'm thoroughly unimpressed with Socrates. And so basically he cheats. But to get back to the subject, the reason that I, as a American living in Europe, can support a party like Zihad is because they are to Israel what what the ideal alt-right party would be to the West. It's the best they've got. So we don't in the U.S. we don't really have a separate party yet, but to the extent that Donald Trump and the Bannon wing of the God Emperor's party, that every country has its own alt-right. Every country has its own nationalism. And it's not about the parties, it's about the people. It's about the nation. And so the key is for us to understand, the globalists want to pretend that all the nationalists are at each other's throat. And it's easy for them to pretend that because they point to the to the ridiculous, what I call the alt-Reich. They point to the Nazis who want to run around and role play that they are the Teutonic supremacist imperialists. Well, that has nothing to do with the alt-right whatsoever. They can claim that it does, but it doesn't. It's not even right-wing. And so, so the media, the media's goal is to build up the globalist campaign. The media's goal is to support globalism. So of course they're going to falsely portray nationalism as much as they can. And it's interesting because you'll notice that whenever they talk to somebody on the alt-right, they always go running to the Richard Spencers, they go running to the people who will monkey dance for them. Now what you may not realize is that they often come to me, or Mike Cernovich, or others as well, Steve Saylor, and yet we give them answers. I don't talk to them on the phone anymore because I don't like to give them the chance to cherry pick. They like to keep you on for like 3 or 4 hours and then take 2 sentences that you said. So what I do is I insist on written questions. And so, for example, I've been communicating recently with a reporter from the BBC. And, in his case, it's fine. He's working on a book. So he's actually going more in depth and that sort of thing, and that's good. But, when the New York Times or when Politico or somebody else like that interviews me, they don't use the questions they asked or the answers that I gave. Why? Because it doesn't fit their narrative. So that's why whenever you see a quote-unquote alt-right figure being quoted, you should understand that the reason they're being quoted is because what those monkey dancers are saying fits the media's narrative. And so, somebody asked me, is Andrew Anglin, legitimate, or is he some sort of, left-wing provocateur or whatever? I don't know. I have no idea. I've never spoken to the guy. I don't read his site. I don't pay any attention to that sort of thing. What I do know is that it didn't shock me when it came out that Mike Enoch was actually married to a Jewish woman who apparently is on the left. And because, he was always, unlike the other TRS guys, he was always extremely hostile to me. And I was always kind of wondering, like, well, what's that all about? I know nothing about this guy. I don't even know who he is. I've never said anything about him. And so, it does sort of raise the question: are they, are they provocateurs? And they, that's why they dislike the people who are legitimately putting forth a convincing case for the alt-right? I don't know. I'm completely serious. I mean, Enoch is an absolute idiot. I don't know that he's a complete fraud. I mean, we know that he's enough of a fraud that he was hiding. No, they didn't create the alt-right. Don't be ridiculous. Richard Spencer did not create the alt-right. The alt-right is just a name for the people who were methodically expelled by William F. Buckley. The alt-right was born and created long before these people were even born. You don't know your history of the conservative movement. You don't know about the John Birch Society. You don't know about William F. Buckley. You don't know about John O'Neill. You know, Steve Saylor. Yeah, it's true. Alternative right was coined by Paul Gottfried. Richard Spencer didn't even coin the term. You know, and like I've pointed out, you don't create these things. You don't create these things. You describe these things. Scientists did not create the okapi when they found it and named it. It already existed. The ideas that the alt-right represents already existed. You know, all we're doing is describing things that exist. I mean, Richard Spencer, look at the number of languages that the 16 points of the alt-right are translated into. Nobody in any of those other languages are reading Richard Spencer. Okay? His stuff is not translated into Hungarian. He doesn't have Jews in Israel who accept the basic ideas. You know, the dissident right, the alternative right, all these things are the same thing. What the alt-right has been trying to do, right, exactly. The alt-right is nationalist, and there are a number of other ideas that are out there. Yeah, I mean, and I don't have any problem with Richard Spencer. I've had him on Brainstorm, I think, twice. He's asked me to contribute to Radix or something like that, you know. But, you know, what he wants to do, and what Greg Johnson wants to do, is that they're caught up in these old media models where I mean, just so you understand, I mean, keep in mind, I've talked to these guys. I like these guys, you know. What they want to do is they want to basically set up a heritage foundation for the dissident right. They want to get people to give them money, and so they can set up a think tank, so they can sit around and write stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that if you do that, then you're going to be owned by them. And so, you know, that it's just a fundamental mistake. It's not a bad model. It's just an outdated one. You know, it's not 1975 anymore. You know, the internet now exists. You know, if you want to build up influence, look at Stefan Molyneux. Look at Mike Cernovich. You know, look at InfoWars. Those guys are doing it right. Those guys are, you know, if that was my goal, those are the models that I would follow. You know, I'm not particularly interested in it myself. You know, I just like to design my games and write my books and mind my own business. I'm not interested in being a leader or building up a movement or doing anything like that. You know, to a certain extent, the stuff that I've done has been because I've been kicked out of, you know, mainstream publishing and this, that, the other thing. So you know, once you get deplatformed, you have no choice but to build your own platforms. So that's why I'm building my platforms. And so, you know, and I don't have, I mean, just so you understand, I don't have an issue with the alt-white, you know, personally. You we basically have a truce where we leave each other alone. That works for me. I want to secure a future for white children too. And so, there's enough points of commonality that there's no need for everybody to get their panties in a bunch about everything. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with them saying, hey, we're not crazy about this, you're not crazy about that. I don't like their media model, maybe they don't like mine. It doesn't matter. But one of the problems though is that part of the alt-whites model is that they think that they need to generate conflict in order to get attention. And that's true to a certain extent, but they have to learn that once you get to a certain point, you're big enough that you got to stop doing that. Once you're at the point where you get attention, well, yes, politics is conflict, but the point is that the only reason they're doing a lot of the conflict is to get attention. Well, once you're already getting attention, you need to stop with the conflict. How often do you see Cernovich picking fights these days? He doesn't do it because he's already got enough attention. He's already got a big enough platform. Okay, the object, and just so you understand, the object of that sort of thing was never to take other people down. It was to build yourself up. Okay, once you have a platform, you need to stop doing that kind of stuff, and you need to have. That's right. You need to have an economic plan. You need to build. If you look at, well, Cernovich is not alt-right. He's what we call alt-light. He's definitely a civic nationalist rather than an ethno-nationalist, and so forth. No, but that's the point. No, but you're not understanding. See, again, you guys on the alt-white don't get it. You don't rhetorically demolish the opposition by attacking people who are on your side of the spectrum. That's stupid. If I had one piece of advice for them, it'd be just don't talk about anybody to the right of Paul Ryan. Who is doing that? On my blog every day. On my, on Gab every day. I have 25 alt-white people muted. No, you don't understand. Yes, they do. Some of them do. And Spencer is always leaping in to try to criticize things. But again, he's still trying to get enough attention so that he can build up his think tank. Again, fine if you want, but it's never going to work. If you go back and look at the first time I talked about this stuff on the blog, I said it's never going to work. And so, I'm not saying, okay, let's stop talking about this, but I'm not saying that everybody's doing that, I have no problem with red ice. The red ice is great. Even the guys such as the TDS guys and stuff, they do their own thing, and that's fine. That's the way it should be. But what the alt-white has to understand is that they are not doing themselves any favors. You want to build up your own nation. That's great. Do so. But you're not going to be able to do so if you're running around trying to create a war with everybody. That's why I keep telling people you need to understand this concept of omni-nationalism. You need to understand that there are people in very, very different countries. Okay, dude, you just gotta shut up. You're really annoying. Seriously, some of you need to understand, this is not like your personal chance to debate Vox time. There are several hundred people on here, so I don't mind a question or two, a comment or two, but this constant trying to force your own narrative, get your own Periscope if you want. But anyhow, But the point that I'm trying to make is that there are so many points of commonality because the globalists are after everybody. The globalists are very occupied in trying to force their one world system on everybody. And I don't care if you're a illiterate Igbodu tribesman in Nigeria, or if you're a highly educated, barren, 50-year-old female academic in Germany, or if you're a 19-year-old shitlord in the US. Everybody has the globalists against them. All of them are targeted enemies of the globalists. And so that's why there are a tremendous amount of points of commonality and things that we have in common with people that we share virtually nothing else with, that we don't share language with, we don't share culture with, and yet they are still potential allies. And it's very important to understand the term allies. Allies are by definition not you. I cannot be an ally with myself. That's right. The end game of the globalists will destroy all nations. Not just the white nations, all nations. And so that's why it's so important to understand that the nationalists in Pakistan, the nationalists in Israel, the nationalists in France, they are all potentially your ally. Yeah, and I mean, enemy of my enemy is at least my ally. And so, anyhow, I think that the more that people understand this, the more difficult it is for the media to put the alt-right in that little Nazi box that they want to try to put them in order to discredit and disqualify and demoralize them. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, we need to run around and play the no, I'm not. Don't call me racist. Don't call me a Nazi. I'm not saying that at all. I don't care what the media calls me. It's not a concern to me. But by the same token, it's very important to continue to speak the truth and continue to give people time and to continue to present to them our ideas in a way that are reasonably palatable to reasonable people. So I think the legacy media is going to live on. I think that they'll be funded one way or another. And so I think that, you know, this is a old battle. This is an old dream that we're dealing with. And they were really excited. They thought that they were really close, and they didn't realize that they were simply riding the wave. You know, they were riding the bubble of the biggest credit boom in man's history. And so, you know, the whole thing, the Tower of Babel fell, and the globalist system is going to fall. You know, we don't have to do anything to make it happen. You know, we should do as we see fit. We should do as we believe to be right. But the fact is that the waves of history are going to play out on their own, regardless of what we think, regardless of what we do, and regardless of what we say. So, you know, and that should give us confidence. That should give you confidence to understand that most of the things that will happen are things that have happened before. But we need to be ready and plant the seeds so that when things do fall apart, we can rebuild in a more productive and positive manner. So anyhow, word of the day, Omni-nationalism. Remember it. spread it out there. When people ask, if they ask you if you're not nationalist, you say, what kind of nationalist? Omni-nationalist. I support white nationalists. I support yellow nationalists. I support red nationalists. I am a red nationalist. So people always ask me about oh, are you a white supremacist? And I say, no, I'm a red segregationist. I very firmly support the right of Indian tribes to be sovereign on their Indian reservations. So anyhow, have a good evening. Visit Infogalactic Tech when you get a chance, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks very much.